thank you so much, everyone, for being here right after lunch. I'm hoping that we will keep it short and crisp so that it's engaging for all of you as well. I think just to do a very quick context setting in terms of what we're trying to achieve here, when we talk about the agile world, the talent landscape today obviously, gets impacted the most because talent at the end of the day is the front and center of business strategy, right? So we've got an esteemed panel here today to talk about a little bit in terms of how, when we talk about the agile world, is it majorly impacting the talent landscape, and how is it that we as leaders, what is it that we can do to stay ahead of the curve? So I'm going to very quickly jump on to the question and probably start with one opening for all of you. When you talk about particularly the shift towards an agile world, I would like to understand a little bit from all of you, what does it even mean when we talk about agile world in context of talent management, right? When you talk about the entire hire to retire cycle, in your experience in all your organizations, which have been some of the aspects that you've seen which have gotten impacted the most in this changing landscape? So, Yuvraj, maybe I'll start from you, and then we can go around the table, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ritika. And I think suddenly it seems as if you just finished your 100-meter sprint and reached to the stage, and a question has come shooting at you. So I think, no, I think agile word, what comes to my mind is that if we continue to approach talent management and people practices the way it used to be done 20 years back, I think we are missing the context. And what I mean by saying that what we are missing the context is that, 20 years back, educational institutions, type of talent in the market, the type of organizations were in a very different shape and form. You had certain number of institutes which used to rule the roost. You used to have organizations which are pretty classical in their own ways of working, and they used to define how the talent management has to be done. Cut to now, if you look at in the country, there are organizations, institutions which are churning out talent which is of a very, very different quality. You can almost say that, every city has few institutions which can vouch of having great talent supply. You look at the organizations which are also very, very fast, agile, and they are also going up very fast the way they are coming down in certain cases. So if you look at the overall operating environment, if it has changed, how do you really handle talent management and how do you bring in agility in the process? We at Make My Trip, we have around 3,500 people. And I think all the processes when we call in terms of HR are supposed to be agile, and it is agile. Starting from, structure of HR. The structure of HR is not very classical structure wherein you have talent acquisition team, learning and development team, comp and ben team, operations team. Teams are very differently structured. Half of the work for anybody's profile is more project-based, which can cut across any teams, Performance management systems. I don't think that a classical performance management system wherein you evaluate everybody at the end of the year really works. We have a grid wherein people in different departments at different levels get evaluated and appraised at a different point of time in a year, and they get rewarded in the similar fashion. You have talent acquisition practices which are very different than what normally organizations would have. So I think that across all the areas, if you have HR operating model which is very agile and flexible, that's one sign of agility. Second, your processes needs to be very, very agile, and they should not be structured the way it has been taught in the textbooks. The transparency of approach, overall working methodology should really get driven from bottom rather than coming from top. If you look at talent management practices, 9-box models or identifying top talent, all those exercises are still relevant, but the way they are done are very, very different. And that's how I feel if you embrace all this, I think HR can be an agile function. And that is how agility in HR I will define here.
Thank you so much. My name is Mukund Rajgopalan. I'm at BCG, and in the work we do, I get to see both private and public sector organizations. I'm actually, I'm actually based out of Singapore, and I work kind of across the region. So I get to see organizations in a few different contexts. I think it's I really like what you said, Yuvraj, about, if you think about the talent management process, how things have changed at every single step. I think if I take a slightly different perspective, right, and you've covered the kind of the classical process and how that's changed. The part I find most fascinating in talent management is it feels like a bit of a disconnect between what business is asking for, because the demands and needs are so different right now. But the fascinating thing is it's not just businesses. I'm seeing it coming from government, and often at very ambitious scales, saying we want our population, our citizens, to be skilled in very different areas, digital, AI, all of those things. And it's not just the more advanced or developed nations who are saying this. We are seeing this even in, the less developed parts of Southeast Asia or the Middle East or, CIS states, right? Places like that. So I think the other angle I would say is the need for talent has gone up. The ability to find the right people has become much more difficult. And therefore, before you manage the process, you need to know what are you actually solving for. And I think that's a complete paradigm shift, right? And in that sense, I'm seeing a lot of diversity in the market, right? Some organizations which are still putting the nuts and bolts in place, and others who are, maybe 2 steps beyond that. And I think it's going to be a crucial determinant of how successful organizations are going forward.
Thank you. Interesting perspectives, of course. I'll just get back to the fundamentals here. I mean, what does agile mean in the context of talent is something which you asked. Look, I'll just go back as far as agile is concerned. It emanates from the software industry, right? And it talks about how collaborative you are, how flexible you are, how adaptable you are. And I think those are the 3 or 4 things as far as flexibility and adaptability with respect to agile is what I want to link it up with the talent management strategies. And talent management, essentially classically seen, is about getting the right talent on board, developing that talent, and ensuring that talent stays with you, right? And even when it leaves, what is the impression that it kind of has on the organization? And that's perhaps is extremely important today from a branding perspective. Now, I would say as far as this world of agile is concerned, look, we are honestly, and it's a scary world in a way, right? This whole, the BC era or the before COVID era is extremely different, or in many ways actually different from the after COVID era, right? The AC era is very different. So from a talent acquisition perspective, right, you need talent, which is, and it's slightly different in the sense that, I find that there is a lot of talent, by the way. So talent is abundant. And I always say this, intelligence is a commodity which you can buy. You have, robos doing operations. And leadership is what will really differentiate going ahead. Organizations and people for that matter. So acquisition of talent, today, look, I want to hire people who are not only skilled, but also people who have that capability of learn and unlearn quickly. And unlearn is a difficult thing. It's not forgetting, because unlearning is different from forgetting, and learning is about acceptance. Number 2, as far as development of talent is concerned, I think it's a big change. Learning and development is a continuous process today. So how do you really develop them? I mean, gone are the days when you sat with your manager as far as talent management is concerned once a year. You have to almost sit perhaps every month with continuous reviews in terms of what's going well and what's not. That's what the organizations need to adapt about. Career development for that matter, or talent development paths have to be extremely different for individuals. You have to have agile paths. Hierarchical growth, I don't think is the order of the day. You have to move people cross-functionally, horizontally. Talent has to be mobile. So I think, there's a lot which is happening in the world today. And just to kind of quote what I love really, Alvin Toffler, we are in a world of future shock. So I think talent management is something which is going to shock everyone as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those perspectives. And I think very interesting points. We talked about change, need for change in operating models, the processes needing to be a lot more flexible. And a very pertinent point, Amit, that you made in terms of, opportunity for people to move around cross-functionally. I think one related point, which at least in my experience, and I would like to hear your perspectives also, which is really coming about is the need for having a lot more self-empowered teams, right? Basically, team of teams. That is the new model, effectively, that a lot of lot of organizations are moving towards. So, would like to open this up for all three of you, basis your experience, some of the best practices that you may have incorporated in your organizations. How do we as leaders really create an ecosystem that allows our teams to be self-empowered? Both from a cultural aspect and even from a structure aspects. Any best practices that you can share, which you have come across, which have essentially successfully enabled that? Yeah.
I think at the heart of agility is uh, team sizes. If team sizes are unwielding, the decision-making, overall execution becomes very, very affected. And if you look at fast-moving organizations, like if I have to take an example of our organization, we are in product tech of travel. You can't really wait for those earlier times wherein you will be the first one to the market with right first time approach. Many organizations go to the market with the whatever concepts they have. They may think of, doing is better than perfect. Go to the market, take feedback, and come back and look at your product differently. And if you need to work with that sort of a rhythm, you need to ensure that small pods, what we work with, in case a feature is being developed on our product, there's a design person, there's a product person, there's a revenue person, there is a technology team, there is a different customer team. So there are small pods which can be around 7 to 15 people, not led strictly by somebody who's hierarchical in terms of role, rather than who's the custodian of that process. And finally, you build a culture wherein people have accountability with each other. You ensure that their rewards are linked. You also ensure that somewhere people are also sharing feedback about each other's ways of working. You create a system like that, and I think it helps bringing things far, far faster. If you further look at this whole structure, where does the role of a head of department comes into picture? I think that the head of the department who's handling team and allowing teams to be empowered, allowing decisions to be taken at the grassroots level, is the one who is very successful and perhaps is having a good time, as compared to somebody who might be sitting in a structure and trying to control it from the top. And as I said, that within HR team when we work, I think that classically my comp and ben guy also does HR business partnering. My talent acquisition guys also do HR business partnering. And they all work in a team under a leader, and within 3 months their role can really change based on the design of the organization, need of the organization. 2 years back we had such a great resignation factor going on. Everybody was doing hiring. There was nothing called that you hire more recruiters in the team. Similarly, when things settle down, now we are trying to get into engagement, learning and development, capability development. People have started doing different type of roles. So this helps not only keep people engaged, people also build skills within the functions. They get perspective from people who are in the team, and finally they stick around in the organization rather than really becoming very, very verticalized in their ways of working. So I think that this is one of the ways we do it. And as I was telling you that, rewards recognition plays an important part with respect to agility in the organization. If you have it linked, tied to the goals which are supposed to be delivered at a certain point of time, I think it makes great amount of sense. So we have diversity and inclusion. Most of the organizations will have as a part of a people goal for everyone. In our case, we have this goal only for the top leaders. There are 30 leaders in the organization who have diversity and inclusion, talent retention as a goal. And not everybody is really chasing. People who are at the front line, they have their process goals are clear that they have to deliver on the business what they are supposed to be. There's no division of 50%, 70% type of a stuff. At a senior level, people might be leading a specific department, but their fortunes are connected with the org delivery. So how do you create your structures which drives agility and also delivery in the organization basically works? And I think that we have been pretty successful in doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to actually build on what both of you had said. Hamid, you spoke about the importance of leadership. I think in creating self-empowered teams, if I had to talk of two things which I think are very important, one is it's clearly leadership, right? Leadership has to know and be comfortable and set the right context for self-empowered teams. And the second point, something that always comes to mind to me when people talk about self-empowered teams is this idea known as the murmuring of birds. Birds when they fly, they do these fascinating things. Like you'll see there's no one leader to the bird, right? Everyone is an individual in that sense. But the birds are known to make these amazing movements, keeping wind currents, temperatures, time of the year, and they migrate, they go from here to there. Thousands of birds. You never see birds bang into each other, falling from the sky. Two got lost, the others reached. It never happens, right? And when scientists tried to analyze this and said, how can we explain this behavior? To define that behavior and create a simulation, they realized that it came down to 3 simple rules. And the first rule is you fly in the average direction of everybody else. The second was you don't get too close to any other bird. The third rule, you don't go too far from anybody else. That's it. If you have these 3 rules, you can simulate the behavior of birds flying. Now, I find that to be remarkable, right? And I think it tells us a little bit about what the leadership philosophy needs to be. So leadership is important, and what's the leadership philosophy? You have to have very simple rules. We establish goals and everybody aligns. Once it's established, you go after it, right? You have the freedom to do things by yourself, so you're not going to be, told every day, okay, report in with this, that, and the other. But at the same time, you do keep, you don't go too far off the track as well. I think those are very helpful rules to think about.
Okay, I guess a lot has been said. Just maybe 2 or 3 points on this one. Self-empowered teams. I think I'll answer this in 2 perspectives. One is from the perspective of structure, and through 2, perhaps more importantly, from the perspective of culture. Right? Structurally, I think organizations will have to be extremely flat, right? So that the flow of information is fast, so that hierarchies are breaking down. Now, importantly, because you have a lot of Gen Zs or millennials, as the case may be, joining the workforce, which anyway, from a mindset's perspective, are not very hierarchical, right? So hierarchies have to break down from a structural perspective, and that's what I saw in some of the organizations that I worked in, one of them being GE, by the way we implemented spans and layer. I think, but more importantly, is the aspect of culture, right? How do you kind of create the right culture where teams are empowered? Number 1, and I think this is extremely important, do you have a shared purpose? I mean, is the purpose higher than your own self? And that I think is extremely important. People keep on talking about purpose, trust and all, but I think it's really missing, especially in profit-making organizations. I think where it's a case of people over profits, well, it comes. But in cases where it's profits over people, I think it's difficult to arrive at. I think shared purpose, shared intentionality is extremely important. Leadership, modeling the real behaviors down the line for people is extremely important. Are you an organization which does not only foster competition, but genuine collaboration, right? I mean, managers are in a position where you have to compete and collaborate at the same time. But are you talking about collaboration in the real essence of the term, or are you just paying lip service to it? So I think culturally, these aspects have to be in place apart from the structural aspects to ensure that your teams are really empowered. Of course, the entire ecosystem has to be there because it takes a village to raise a child, right? So primarily 2 things to your perspective or to your question, structure and culture, with culture perhaps being extremely important.
Sure. No, thank you so much for that. I think just the takeaway for me is, one, like you said, Raj, decentralization, empowering teams through that. Then as we talk about guidance and not rule-based policy, so therefore you give autonomy. And then I heard from you, Hamid, one, obviously leaders leading the way in a sense. And secondly, also how do we make sure that the goals are simple, but cascaded down with the shared purpose itself, right? So I think very, very pertinent points. I know we've got about 5 minutes and all of our panelists are on a very tight schedule. So I'm going to open up for audience for 1 question. Anything, I don't want to hoard the mic myself. So yes, let's take 1 question. I saw that gentleman's hand first, so maybe I'll just pick it up. And the question is open for all the panelists.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for a wonderful session. And my name is Nitin. I am part of McKinsey. I'm a specialist in McKinsey. My question was very simple. All three of you spoke about how we need to have a flat structure, how an HRBP model is growing up, and how everybody is doing everything. So my question is, people who are subject matter experts, are they a dying breed in the organizations today? Are they a dying breed in the organizations today? Subject matter experts or specialists, people who are doing one role, but very focused and very experts in that one role, are they a dying breed?
Are they aligned with us?
Are they a dying breed?
Are they a dying breed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are they not relevant anymore?
This is an interesting perspective, by the way. I'll refer to you one interesting literature on this one, by the way. There is an interesting work by a CNN journalist called Fareed Zakaria. I'm sure many of you would have heard about him. Fareed Zakaria has written an interesting perspective or interesting book called 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. Right? Now, in that, one of the chapters it is, which is quite pertinent for all of us here, or for, how experts must listen to people and how people must listen to experts. And how going ahead, your careers, by the way, will be like a T or several T's under a T, which is you have to be broad, but in at least in one area you have to be a deep specialist. Generalists, may have a question mark. Specialists again may have a question mark. But if you are a genuine T, and within a T, many T's, right, which is kind of a difficult possibility, sky's the limit. So that's my take on this one.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and I completely agree, and I'll put a different frame to it. I think the question to ask is not, am I too specialized or am I too generalized? I think the question to ask is, how am I adding value? And how would I add value in the future? Because to add value, you actually need that, right? You will need to have a certain amount, and obviously with time, more specialization and expertise that people know, I can go to X for this. But at the same time, if you're not broad enough or being able to work with people to translate that to value, it's not going to be very helpful. But what that also means is people are people, right? There might be those who don't have deep expertise, but are extremely good at taking people along and getting to an outcome, right? And that is still you're adding value. So I think if it's a question of where is the future, are experts going to be a dying breed? No, not necessarily. But it's the people who rise to the top in some ways are those who are recognized to add value, right? And I think that's the key.
Great. I think, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have to take more questions. I really wish that we could have gone on for longer, but thank you so much, gentlemen, for a very, very stimulating conversation. And thank you, all of you, for being a lovely audience. I'm sure we will at some point resume this conversation, but thank you so much. Appreciate your time.